on this afternoon.
Talk to us about how this goes from a felony to a misdemeanor.
There's a provision under Oregon law which allows Class C felonies to be treated as an A misdemeanor. And when we say treated as one, we mean in every respect. That's the way the conviction is entered. And it's not uncommon to do that. I'd also add that the potential sentence, there's a difference between the statutory sentence potential, which is what the judge is required to inform a criminal defendant of when they're arraigned, and what the Oregon law actually currently allows as the maximum sentence. I know that's a difficult thing to sort of parse out. But the bottom line is, on a Berg 2, if it had been a felony, the presumptive sentence would have been probation and not more than 10 days in jail. So, and then had that sentence been imposed and had the probation been violated, the potential maximum sanction in jail again would have been 6 months. So he could have done the 10 days plus up to 20 days in sanction time before the sentence would have been converted to a revocation and 6 months in jail. As an A misdemeanor, the maximum potential is up to a year in the county jail. So his actual exposure, if he fails and fails and fails, is longer on the misdemeanor sentence. Now, there are many other consequences associated with the felony conviction, but in terms of potential jail time, that's what it is.
Why did this case take so long to kind of get started? Finally, we hear something a couple of days ago, and is it unusual for it to be solved this quickly like that?
No, it's not unusual. It's you know, sometimes when police arrive at the scene, the facts that are immediately apparent. The evidence is available, the witnesses are all there, and in other cases, they're not immediately apparent, and they require a lot of rooting around. And sometimes there are sort of complicating elements out there that make it difficult to get access to the information. And but it's not unusual to take 30 days to develop a burglary case. That's about what this was.
Did you consider Jeremiah Masoli's past criminal history will result in this case, and what impact, if any, did it have?
He has no adult criminal history, and so I'll leave it with that.
Couldn't a juvenile crime, if it matched up, be a property crime, be considered in a case like this?
Juvenile crimes, it depends on a lot of circumstances, but juvenile crimes which match up well to a person felony under Oregon law can be considered under the sentencing guidelines positioning, but that would have had no significant impact in any event on a burglary 2, even if it had been treated as a felony under the Oregon sentencing guidelines. None. I'm happy to pull out the guidelines and explain that if you want to see how that works, but it would not have mattered.
Were you able to get, I can't tell from reading this, a clean set of prints from Masoli?
We did, yes, and I thank you for mentioning that. This affidavit that I'm sharing with all of you was never filed. This was an affidavit that was prepared by one of the detectives working the case in anticipation of needing a search warrant for the prints. But ultimately, we called the lawyers involved and said, is he willing just to give us a set of his prints? And they said, sure. I mean, there was a willingness to just work the case out.
And so matched up, obviously.
They didn't match up. And that's, I know the public expects this, particularly in the wake of the CSI series, the public expects that we'll get fingerprints most of the time. The reality is we often don't.
Alex, do you know what was the motivation for this? Was there anything beyond just burglary?
We may never know. The answer is I don't know what the motivation was. I mean, other than that stuff and it's worth something. Beyond that, I don't know.
Were you able to look at anything on the computer? Any photos?
Oh, I don't think there's any reason to believe that it was the contents of the computer people were interested in.
But do you have any motivation that it was getting back at the SAE fraternity?
No, I don't think it's anything that sexy. I think those are valuable PCs, or not PCs, they were valuable Macs, and it was a nice projector, and they were worth something.
So if the prints didn't match up, what did you go on as far as deciding to charge Masoli?
There was a lot of other evidence. he had been seen in the fraternity house. We had some surveillance from other locations. We had witnesses who had come forward. It was clear, I think you've probably all heard the 911 tape. The reason the victim is out of breath is from having chased Mr. Embry. There were many other circumstances which made it clear who was present.